The child had not eaten in 23 days. Tanya Morrison stood in the marble entryway of the Bennett mansion, her worn blue suitcase beside her polished black shoes, and listened to the desperate man before her describe how his daughter was disappearing. Not all at once. Slowly. Like watching ice melt in reverse, watching something solid become nothing but air and memory. "The doctors have given up," Richard Bennett said. His gray suit hung perfectly on his shoulders, but his eyes were hollowed out, empty spaces where hope used to live. "They've tried everything. Feeding tubes. Medications. Therapy." She pulls the tubes out. She won't swallow the pills. She just stares at the wall. Tanya's hands remained steady at her sides. She wore a bright green dress, the nicest one she owned, the one she saved for job interviews. She had applied for a housekeeping position. The agency said the family needed someone who could clean and cook. They didn't mention they needed someone who could bring a child back from the edge of death. "I need you to understand something, Miss Morrison," Richard continued. His voice cracked on her name. "My wife died 4 months ago. Car accident. Grace was in the car. She survived without a scratch, but something inside her broke. She stopped talking 3 weeks after the funeral. Stopped eating 6 weeks after that. We've had specialists from Johns Hopkins, from Mayo Clinic, from Switzerland. Nothing works." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. Each second felt like a small stone dropping into deep water. "The last maid quit yesterday," Richard said. "She couldn't handle watching Grace waste away. I don't blame her. Most people can't. But the agency said you were a pediatric nurse before you went into domestic work. Is that true?" "Yes, sir," Tanya said quietly. "I worked at Children's Memorial for 6 years. I left nursing after some personal reasons." "I don't care about your reasons," Richard said, and his bluntness wasn't cruel, just honest. "I care if you can help my daughter. The position pays triple the normal rate. If you can get Grace to eat, I'll give you a bonus of $50,000. If you can get her talking again, another $50,000. I know that sounds like I'm trying to buy a miracle, but I don't know what else to do." Tanya looked past Richard's shoulder, through the doorway that led deeper into the mansion. Somewhere in this enormous house, a 6-year-old girl was dying because her heart couldn't figure out how to keep living without her mother. "I'll take the position," Tanya said. "And I'll accept your offer with gratitude. But I need you to promise me something, Mr. Bennett." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "What?" "Whatever I ask you to do, however strange it seems, you'll do it. No questions. No hesitation. Can you promise that?" For the first time since Tanya had arrived, something flickered in Richard's eyes. Not hope, not yet. But maybe the memory of what hope felt like. "I promise," he said. Have you ever watched someone you love slip away, unable to stop it, unable to find the right words or the right touch to bring them back? If this story speaks to you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and healing to families who need them. Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. She was a compact woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp blue eyes that had seen 3 generations of Bennett family drama. "I'll show you to your room," Mrs. Patterson said to Tanya. Her voice was professional but not warm. "You'll be staying in the East Wing near Miss Grace's quarters. Mr. Bennett wants someone close by at all times." Tanya picked up her suitcase and followed Mrs. Patterson through hallways lined with oil paintings and fresh flowers. The house smelled like lemon polish and expensive candles, but underneath that was something else. Grief. It clung to the walls like humidity, making everything feel heavier. "I should warn you," Mrs. Patterson said as they climbed a curved staircase. "The last 3 maids couldn't handle it. Watching a child starve herself does something to a person. Makes you feel helpless. Makes you angry. One of them tried to force-feed Miss Grace. It didn't end well." "What happened?" Tanya asked. "Grace bit her. Drew blood. The poor woman needed stitches." Mrs. Patterson glanced back at Tanya. "I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you need to know what you're dealing with. That little girl has shut down completely. She's protecting herself the only way she knows how." They reached the East Wing. Mrs. Patterson stopped in front of a door painted soft blue. "This is your room. Miss Grace is in the next room over. She has a nurse who monitors her vitals during the day, but the nurse leaves at 6. After that, you're the only one nearby." Tanya set her suitcase down and looked at the door next to hers. It was white with a small nameplate that read Grace in gold letters. Someone had hung a wreath of dried flowers on it, probably from the funeral. "Can I meet her now?" Tanya asked. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "You really think you can help her?" I don't know, Tanya said honestly. But I'm going to try. Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Come with me. She knocked gently on Grace's door, then opened it without waiting for a response. The room was massive, decorated in shades of pink and white that probably looked cheerful once but now felt like a museum dedicated to happiness that no longer existed. Stuffed animals lined shelves. A dollhouse sat in one corner, perfectly arranged. Picture books were stacked neatly on a small table. And in the middle of an enormous bed, propped up against a mountain of pillows, was the smallest, palest child Tanya had ever seen. Grace Bennett looked like a porcelain doll someone had forgotten to paint. Her blonde hair lay limp against her shoulders. Her arms were thin as bird bones. Her blue eyes stared at nothing, focused on some point in the middle distance that only she could see. A woman in purple scrubs sat in a chair beside the bed, monitoring an IV drip attached to Grace's arm. She looked up when they entered, relief flooding her face. Thank goodness you're here, the nurse said to Tanya. I'm Julie. I've been covering days since the regular nurse quit. Dr. Foster wants to admit her to the hospital, but Mr. Bennett refuses. He thinks it will traumatize her more. Tanya moved slowly into the room, keeping her movements calm and unthreatening. She didn't go straight to the bed. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the gardens below. They were beautiful, professionally maintained, but empty. No children playing. No laughter. Hello, Grace, Tanya said softly, not turning around. My name is Tanya. I'm going to be staying here for a while. I used to work with kids at a hospital, and I know you've probably had enough of nurses and doctors. But I'm not here to poke you or prod you or force you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm just here to keep you company. Grace didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Tanya turned from the window and finally looked directly at the child. I lost my mother when I was 12 years old, she said. Heart attack. One day she was making breakfast, the next day she was gone. And I know that's different from what happened to you, but I understand what it feels like when the world doesn't make sense anymore. Something changed in Grace's eyes. Not much. Just a flicker. Like a candle flame behind thick glass. Julie, the nurse, watched with interest. I'm supposed to try to get her to drink some nutritional shake before I leave, she said apologetically. It never works, but Dr. Foster insists I try. May I? Tanya asked, holding out her hand for the cup. Julie handed it over, looking doubtful. Tanya sat on the edge of the bed, far enough away to give Grace space, close enough to be present. She held the cup but didn't offer it. Instead, she just sat there, quiet, letting the silence settle around them like snow. I'm not going to ask you to drink this, Tanya said finally. I'm not going to beg or plead or tell you that you need to be strong. I think you're already the strongest person I've ever met. It takes incredible strength to survive what you survived. It takes incredible courage to wake up every day when your heart is broken. Grace's eyes moved slightly, focusing on Tanya for the first time. But I am going to tell you something true, Tanya continued. Your mother wouldn't want you to stop living. I know that sounds like something adults say to make themselves feel better, but I mean it differently. When my mother died, I was so angry. I stopped eating too for about a week. I wanted to punish the world for taking her from me. But then my grandmother, my mother's mother, she sat me down and said something I'll never forget. Tanya paused, making sure Grace was listening. The child's eyes were locked on her now, completely focused. She said, Your mother lived her whole life making sure you had everything you needed to grow strong and happy. Every meal she cooked, every story she read, every hug she gave you was her way of building you up. If you stop eating, if you stop living, you're throwing away everything she worked so hard to give you. And that's not punishment for the universe. That's punishment for yourself and for her memory. A single tear rolled down Grace's cheek. The first tear, according to Julie's shocked expression, that anyone had seen in weeks. Tanya set the cup on the nightstand and stood. I'm not going anywhere, Grace. I'll be in the room next door if you need anything. And tomorrow, if you want, I'll tell you more about my mother. I'll tell you about the time she tried to bake a cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar. I'll tell you about the songs she sang when she thought no one was listening. I'll tell you all the stories that keep her alive in my heart. She walked to the door, nodded to Julie and Mrs. Patterson, and left the room. In the hallway, Mrs. Patterson stared at her. I've never seen her cry. Not since the funeral. Crying is good, Tanya said quietly. Crying means she's starting to feel again. And if she can feel sad, eventually she can feel other things too. Mrs. Patterson's stern expression cracked slightly. Maybe Mr. Bennett was right to hire you after all. That night, Tanya lay in her new bed, staring at the ceiling of her new room. The house settled around her, creaking and sighing like an old woman trying to get comfortable. Through the wall, she could hear nothing from Grace's room. Just silence. But it was a different kind of silence than the one she'd encountered earlier. Not the silence of giving up. The silence of something waiting to begin. Tanya closed her eyes and said a prayer, the same one her grandmother had taught her years ago. Please give me the wisdom to help this child. Give me the patience to wait as long as it takes. Give me the strength to love her even when it's hard. And please, please let her find her way back to the light. In the morning, everything would change. But tonight, in the darkness of a stranger's house, with a dying child one wall away, Tanya Morrison made herself a promise. She would not give up. She would not fail. She would find a way to reach Grace Bennett no matter what it took. Because kindness, hope, and love always find a way. They just need someone brave enough to hold the door open while they do. Tanya woke at 5 in the morning, her body still programmed to hospital shift hours even though she hadn't worked a nursing job in 3 years. She lay still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the unfamiliar shadows of the room, remembering where she was and why. A child who had stopped eating. A father desperate enough to hire a former nurse as a maid. A promise she'd made to herself in the darkness. She rose quietly, washed her face in the attached bathroom, and dressed in the bright blue uniform Mrs. Patterson had left hanging in the closet. The fabric was crisp, expensive, nothing like the worn scrubs she used to wear. She twisted her thick black hair into a bun and studied herself in the mirror. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You've handled worse." But that wasn't quite true and she knew it. She'd handled sick children, frightened children, children in pain. She'd never handled a child who had decided, consciously or unconsciously, that living was too hard to bother with. Downstairs, the kitchen was already alive with activity. A woman in her 30s stood at the massive stove, stirring something in a copper pot. She had rich brown skin, her hair wrapped in a colorful headscarf, and wore a bright red apron over her white uniform. "You must be Tanya," the woman said with a warm Nigerian accent. "I'm Nancy Okafor. I'm the cook here. Well, one of them. They have 3 of us for different meals, but I handle most of the daily cooking." "Nice to meet you," Tanya said. "Is that breakfast?" "Oatmeal," Nancy said, her voice dropping lower. "Not that Miss Grace will eat it. I've been making her favorite foods for weeks. Pancakes, French toast, eggs, all of it. Nothing works. The food just sits there until it gets cold and then Mr. Bennett tells me to throw it away. It breaks my heart every single day." Tanya pulled up a stool at the kitchen island. "Tell me about Grace. Before her mother died, I mean. What was she like?" Nancy's face softened. "Oh, she was such a happy child. Always running through the house, laughing, getting into mischief. She loved helping me in the kitchen. We'd make cookies together and she'd eat half the dough before it even made it to the oven. Mrs. Bennett, Rebecca, she'd pretend to scold us but she was laughing too." "What happened to Rebecca?" Tanya asked gently. "I know it was a car accident, but—" Nancy's stirring slowed. They were driving home from Grace's ballet recital. Rebecca's car went off the road during a rainstorm. The police said she swerved to avoid an animal, maybe a deer. The car hit a tree. Rebecca died at the scene. Grace was in the back seat, completely untouched. Not a scratch. But she saw everything. Tanya's chest tightened. "That's why she stopped talking." "The therapist thinks so. Dr. Patel, the psychologist, she said Grace is trapped in that moment. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees her mother dying. Every time she eats, she feels guilty for being alive. It's called survivor's guilt, apparently. Common in cases like this." "But the doctors said there's nothing more they can do?" Nancy turned off the stove and faced Tanya directly. "They said she needs to choose to live. They can keep her alive with IVs and feeding tubes, but she fights those too. They said unless something changes inside her, unless she decides she wants to keep going, then—" Nancy's voice broke. "Then it's just a matter of time." The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of an ornate clock on the wall. "Mr. Bennett is paying you a lot of money," Nancy said carefully. "Mrs. Patterson told me about the bonus. 50,000 if you can get Grace eating. That's more than most people make in a year." "I know," Tanya said. "So why did you accept?" "Really?" Tanya thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about helping children or making a difference. But Nancy's eyes were too kind, too knowing. "Because I need the money," Tanya said honestly. "My grandmother is in a nursing home. She has dementia. The facility costs more than I can afford on a regular maid salary. I've been working 3 jobs just to keep her there, but I'm still behind on payments. When the agency told me about this position, about the bonus, I thought maybe this was my chance to give her the care she deserves. Nancy nodded slowly. At least you're honest. But let me tell you something, Tanya. That little girl upstairs, she needs someone who genuinely cares about her, not just about money. You can't fake love. Children know. I do care, Tanya said quietly. The money matters, yes. But I also know what it's like to lose your mother too young. I know what it's like to feel like the world has ended. And I know that sometimes, one person caring can make all the difference. Before Nancy could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Richard Bennett appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in a charcoal suit despite the early hour. His face looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. Good morning, he said to both women. Tanya, I'd like to speak with you in my office. Nancy, please send breakfast up to Grace's room as usual. Yes, sir, Nancy said softly. Tanya followed Richard through the mansion to a wood-paneled office lined with bookshelves and framed photographs. Most of the photos showed Grace at various ages, always smiling. Many included a beautiful woman with blonde hair and kind eyes. Rebecca Bennett. The ghost that haunted every room. Richard sat behind his desk and pulled out a folder. I had my lawyer draw up a formal contract. I want everything in writing. Your salary, the bonuses, the conditions. I need you to read it carefully and sign if you agree. He slid the folder across the desk. Tanya opened it and scanned the pages. The salary was indeed triple what she'd been making. The bonus terms were clearly stated. But there was another clause that caught her eye. It says here I'm agreeing to live in the house full-time for a minimum of 3 months, Tanya said. No days off. No leaving the premises except for emergencies. That's correct, Richard said. I need someone with Grace constantly. Someone she can rely on. Someone who won't disappear on her weekends or evenings. Can you commit to that? Tanya thought about her grandmother, about the nursing home, about the stack of unpaid bills in her apartment. 3 months of her life locked in this mansion, caring for a traumatized child. No freedom. No escape. I can commit, she said. But I need to make arrangements for my grandmother's care. Can I have a few hours today to handle that? Of course. Take whatever time you need. Just be back by dinner. Tanya signed the contract, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She was betting everything on the hope that she could reach a child who had lost all hope herself. Richard stood and extended his hand. Thank you, Miss Morrison. I know this isn't a normal position. I know I'm asking you to do something that might be impossible. But I'm grateful you're willing to try. She shook his hand, surprised by how warm it was, how human. In her mind, billionaires were cold, distant creatures. But this man was just a father terrified of losing his daughter. I'll do everything I can, Tanya promised. Back upstairs, she found Mrs. Patterson outside Grace's room, holding a breakfast tray loaded with untouched food. Same as always, Mrs. Patterson said wearily. She won't even look at it. May I try something? Tanya asked. Mrs. Patterson handed her the tray. Be my guest. Tanya entered Grace's room quietly. The child was in the same position as yesterday, propped against pillows, staring at nothing. The 4 drip connected to her arm was the only thing keeping her alive. Instead of approaching the bed, Tanya sat in the chair by the window and set the tray on her lap. She picked up a piece of toast and took a bite. This is really good, she said conversationally. Nancy makes the best toast. She uses real butter, not margarine. My grandmother used to say you can always tell the difference. Grace's eyes flickered toward her, then away. Tanya took another bite. My grandmother is in a nursing home now. She has dementia. Most days she doesn't remember who I am. But sometimes when I bring her toast with butter, she smiles like she's remembering something happy. I think food has memories attached to it. Good memories. She set the toast down and picked up a glass of orange juice. What was your favorite food? Before everything changed? What did your mother make that you loved most? For a long moment, silence. Then, so quietly Tanya almost missed it, Grace whispered, pancakes. Tanya's heart skipped. The child had spoken. Actually formed a word and pushed it out into the world. Pancakes, Tanya repeated softly. What kind? Blueberry? Chocolate chip? Plain, Grace whispered. With lots of syrup. Those sound perfect, Tanya said. Would you like me to ask Nancy to make some for you tomorrow? Grace's eyes filled with tears. I can't. Can't what, sweetheart? Can't eat. If I keep living, it means she's really gone. It means I'm choosing a world without her in it. There it was. The truth underneath the silence. The reason behind the starvation. Grace wasn't trying to die. She was trying not to accept that her mother already had. Tanya set the tray aside and moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Grace, can I tell you something about my mother? Something true? The child nodded slightly. After she died, I was so angry. I kept thinking that if I could just turn back time, if I could just change one small thing, maybe she'd still be alive. Maybe if I'd made her rest more, or if I'd called the doctor sooner, or if I'd been a better daughter, she wouldn't have died. And that guilt, that feeling like I should have done more, it ate me alive. Grace was looking directly at her now, really looking. But my grandmother, she told me something that changed everything. She said, "Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. And the best way to honor that love is to live the biggest, happiest, fullest life you can. Because that's what she wanted for you. That's what she gave her whole life trying to give you." A tear rolled down Grace's cheek, then another. "Your mother didn't die so you could stop living," Tanya said gently. "She died in an accident trying to protect you from danger. She swerved to save an animal. That tells me she was the kind of person who valued life. All life. And I think if she could see you now, she wouldn't want you to waste the life she tried so hard to save." Grace's small body began to shake. "But I miss her. I miss her so much it hurts." "I know," Tanya said. "I know, sweetheart. And you're always going to miss her. That pain doesn't go away. But it does change. It gets softer. And eventually, you can remember the happy times without it hurting quite so much." "Promise?" Grace whispered. "I promise." Grace looked at the tray of food, then back at Tanya. "If I eat, will you stay? Will you keep telling me stories about your mother?" "I'll stay as long as you need me," Tanya said. "And I'll tell you every story I can remember." "Okay," Grace said. Then after a pause, "Can I have the toast?" Tanya's hands trembled as she picked up the plate. She broke off a small piece of toast and handed it to Grace. The child took it with fingers that looked like twigs, brought it to her mouth and took the smallest bite imaginable. But she swallowed. And that was everything. "Good," Tanya said softly. "That's so good, Grace. I'm proud of you." Grace took another tiny bite. Then another. By the time she'd finished the piece of toast, which was barely a quarter of a slice, both she and Tanya were crying. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, drawn by some sixth sense that something had changed. Her eyes widened when she saw the empty space on the plate where toast had been. "She ate," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Dear Lord, she actually ate." "A little bit," Tanya said, not wanting to oversell it. "It's a start." Mrs. Patterson left quickly, probably to tell Richard. Within minutes, footsteps pounded up the stairs. Richard appeared in the doorway, his face transformed by hope. "Grace?" he said, his voice breaking. "Sweetheart." Grace looked at her father, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. "Hi, Daddy." Richard crossed the room in 3 long strides and fell to his knees beside the bed. He took his daughter's hand carefully, like she was made of glass. "I love you so much. I love you so much, Grace." "I love you too," Grace whispered. "I'm sorry I scared you." "You don't have to be sorry," Richard said. "You don't have to be anything except exactly who you are." He looked at Tanya over his shoulder, his eyes wet. "Thank you," he mouthed. Tanya nodded and quietly left the room, giving them privacy. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. One piece of toast. That was all. One tiny piece of toast after 23 days of nothing. But it was enough to start building hope on. And hope, Tanya knew, was the most powerful medicine in the world. Nancy found her an hour later, still standing in the hallway, watching the closed door of Grace's room. "Mr. Bennett told me," Nancy said. "He said she ate. He said you got her to talk." "She's still in danger," Tanya said. "One piece of toast doesn't fix everything. This is going to take time." "But you did what no one else could do," Nancy said. "You gave her a reason to try." Tanya thought about Grace's question. "Will you stay?" "I made a promise," Tanya said. "And I'm going to keep it. No matter what. Because that's what love does. It stays. It waits. It holds the door open and trusts that eventually, the person you're waiting for will find the courage to walk through." The next morning, Tanya knocked softly on Grace's door before entering. It was a small gesture but an important one. Respecting boundaries. Treating the child like a person, not a patient. "Come in," Grace said quietly. Progress. Yesterday she wouldn't have responded at all. Tanya entered carrying a tray that Nancy had prepared with extra care. 3 small pancakes, each no bigger than a silver dollar, arranged in a pattern that looked like a smiling face. Syrup in a small pitcher on the side. A glass of milk. "Nancy made these special for you," Tanya said, setting the tray on the table beside the bed. "She said to tell you she remembers how much you liked helping her make pancakes." Grace looked at the tray, then at Tanya. I can't eat all of that. You don't have to, Tanya said. You just have to try. Even one bite is enough. Will you sit with me? Of course. Tanya pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. Grace slowly reached for a pancake, tore off a small piece and dipped it in syrup. She brought it to her mouth and chewed slowly, her face concentrating on the act like it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. My mother used to make pancakes every Sunday, Grace said after swallowing. She'd let me pour the batter on the griddle. I always made funny shapes, like stars and hearts and sometimes just big blobs. That sounds fun, Tanya said. She'd laugh when I made the blobs. She'd say they were abstract art pancakes. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I can hear her laugh in my head, but it's getting quieter. I'm scared I'll forget what it sounds like. Tanya's throat tightened. Would it help if I told you something my grandmother taught me? About keeping memories alive. Grace nodded. She said that every time you remember someone, every time you tell a story about them, you're keeping them alive in a different way. Not in their body but in the world. Because the people who love them get to know them through your stories. And that way they never really disappear. So if I tell people about my mom, she stays alive? In a way, yes. In the best way. Grace took another small bite of pancake. She had blonde hair like me. But hers was curlier. And she smelled like vanilla because she used this special lotion. And she sang all the time, even when she didn't know the words to songs. She'd just make up words that rhymed. Tanya smiled. She sounds wonderful. She was. Grace paused. Do you remember your mother's smell? Cinnamon, Tanya said immediately. She loved cinnamon. She put it in everything. Coffee, oatmeal, toast. Our whole house smelled like Christmas year-round. I like that, Grace said. She finished the pancake piece and reached for another. Tell me more about her. So Tanya did. She told Grace about her mother's terrible singing voice, how she'd belt out church hymns completely off-key. She told her about the time her mother tried to fix the kitchen sink and ended up flooding the entire first floor. She told her about small moments, ordinary moments, the kind that don't seem important until the person is gone. Grace ate 3 more small bites while Tanya talked. Not much. Maybe a quarter of one pancake total. But more than yesterday. Dr. Helen Foster arrived at 10 in the morning for her daily checkup. She was a slim woman in her 40s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She carried a medical bag and wore a professional expression that softened when she saw Grace sitting up in bed, awake and alert. Well, this is different, Dr. Foster said. Good morning, Grace. Good morning, Grace said quietly. Dr. Foster glanced at Tanya, recognition flickering across her face. You must be the new nurse Mr. Bennett hired. Not a nurse anymore, Tanya said. Just helping where I can. Helping is an understatement. Richard told me Grace ate yesterday. And it looks like she ate breakfast this morning too. Dr. Foster examined the tray, noting how much was gone. This is excellent progress. She spent the next 15 minutes checking Grace's vital signs, examining her, asking gentle questions. Grace answered in whispers, but she answered. That alone was remarkable. I'm going to reduce the 4 fluids, Dr. Foster said to Tanya after the examination. If she keeps eating even small amounts, we can start weaning her off the 4 completely in a few days. But we need to be careful. Her system has been shutting down. We have to bring it back slowly. I understand, Tanya said. Dr. Foster packed her medical bag and headed for the door, then turned back. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You've accomplished more in 2 days than we managed in 2 months. After she left, Tanya helped Grace get dressed in real clothes for the first time in weeks. A soft pink sweater and comfortable gray pants. Grace's hands shook as she tried to button the sweater, her muscles weak from disuse. Let me help, Tanya said gently. I can do it, Grace insisted. I'm not a baby. I know you're not. But it's okay to accept help when you need it. Grace considered this, then nodded. Okay. Together they got her dressed. Then Tanya suggested something bold. Would you like to sit by the window? Look outside. Grace's eyes widened. I'm allowed. Of course you're allowed. This is your house, sweetheart. You can go wherever you want. But what if I fall? I feel really weak. I'll hold you. I won't let you fall. Grace thought about it, then slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed. Tanya supported her as she stood on wobbly legs that could barely hold her weight. Together they shuffled to the window seat, moving at a pace that would make a snail look fast. But they made it. Grace collapsed onto the cushioned window seat, breathing hard from the effort. But her eyes were bright as she looked out at the gardens below. The roses are blooming, she said with wonder. I didn't know it was summer. Late spring, Tanya corrected gently. Almost summer. I've been in bed so long I lost track of time. Grace pressed her hand against the glass. Everything looks different. Brighter. That's because you're looking at it with new eyes, Tanya said. Eyes that have decided to see beauty again. They sat together by the window for an hour, not talking much, just existing in the same space. Grace would point out things she saw. A bird landing on a branch. A gardener trimming hedges. Clouds moving across the sky. Such simple things. But to a child who had been locked in her own grief for months, they were miracles. Richard found them there when he came home for lunch. He stood in the doorway staring at his daughter sitting by the window dressed in real clothes, looking at the world outside. Grace? He said softly, like he was afraid speaking might break the spell. Hi, Daddy, Grace said. Look, there's a butterfly on the roses. It's yellow. Richard crossed the room and knelt beside the window seat. It's beautiful. Mommy loved butterflies, Grace said. She said they were proof that things can change and become something better. Richard's face crumpled slightly, but he held it together. She was right. Daddy? Grace said. I'm sorry I stopped talking to you. I'm sorry I stopped eating. I didn't know how to be sad and still be alive at the same time. Oh, sweetheart. Richard pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her fragile body. You don't have to apologize. You were doing the best you could. We all were. Tanya is teaching me that it's okay to remember Mommy and still live, Grace said. She says every time I talk about Mommy, I'm keeping her alive in a different way. Richard looked at Tanya over Grace's shoulder. His eyes were full of gratitude and something else. Something deeper. Tanya is very wise, he said. That afternoon, Richard asked Tanya to join him in his office again. She followed him downstairs, wondering if there was a problem. I wanted to discuss Grace's care plan, Richard said, closing the office door. Dr. Foster suggested we might want to bring in a child psychologist again. Someone to help Grace process her trauma. That's a good idea, Tanya said. But maybe wait a week or two. Let her stabilize physically first. The therapy sessions before were exhausting for her. She needs to build up her strength. Richard nodded. That makes sense. He paused. I also wanted to thank you. Properly. What you're doing for Grace, it's beyond anything I could have hoped for. I'm just doing my job. No, Richard said firmly. You're doing much more than that. You're giving my daughter her life back. You're giving me hope. And I need you to know that whatever you need, whatever would make this easier for you, you just have to ask. Tanya thought about her grandmother, about the nursing home bills, about the weight of worry she'd been carrying for years. Actually, she said slowly, there is something. I have a grandmother who's in a nursing home. I haven't been able to visit her since I started working here. Would it be possible to arrange for her to come here? Just for an afternoon? I think it might be good for Grace too. To meet someone else who understands loss. Richard didn't hesitate. Of course. Give me her information and I'll have a car bring her here. We'll set up a visiting room, make it comfortable. Whatever you need. Thank you, Tanya said, emotion welling up. That means more than you know. You're helping my family, Richard said simply. It's only right that I help yours. That evening, Tanya sat with Grace during dinner. Nancy had made a simple soup, something easy to digest. Grace managed 4 spoonfuls before pushing the bowl away. I'm full, she said. That's okay. You did great. Grace leaned back against her pillows, looking tired but content. Tanya? Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Mommy would be proud of me? For trying to eat again? Tanya took Grace's small hand in hers. I think your Mommy is always proud of you. But yes, I think she'd be especially proud right now. Because you're being so brave. I don't feel brave. I feel scared. Bravery is doing hard things even when you're scared. That's exactly what you're doing. Grace was quiet for a moment. Will you tell me more about your mom tomorrow? Every day if you want. I want, Grace said. Then, Tanya? I'm glad you're here. I'm glad Daddy found you. I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm glad too. That night, Tanya stood at her window looking out at the moonlit gardens. Behind her, through the wall, she could hear Grace breathing quietly in sleep. Regular breaths. Steady breaths. The breaths of a child who had decided to keep living. It was only the 3rd day. There was still so much work to do, so much healing ahead. But they had taken the first steps. The hardest steps. And for tonight that was enough. By the end of the first week, Grace was eating regular small meals 3 times a day. Not much. A few bites here, a few spoonfuls there. But consistently. Her body was slowly remembering how to accept nourishment. The 4 was removed on day 8. Dr. Foster supervised the process, watching Grace carefully for signs of distress or regression. But Grace just looked at her arm afterward and said, "Good. Now I look less like a science experiment." Dr. Foster laughed, surprised. "You do indeed." That afternoon, Richard's mother arrived unannounced. Beverly Bennett was a tall woman in her late 60s with silver hair cut into an elegant bob. She wore a cream-colored suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. "Where is my granddaughter?" she asked Mrs. Patterson immediately upon entering. "Upstairs with Tanya, ma'am." Beverly's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Tanya? The new maid? Well, nurse. Well." Mrs. Patterson fumbled. "She's the one who got Miss Grace eating again." Beverly's expression sharpened with interest. "I need to meet this person immediately." She climbed the stairs with surprising speed for a woman her age and arrived at Grace's room just as Tanya was reading aloud from a picture book. Grace was curled up on the window seat, wrapped in a soft blanket, actually listening to the story. "Grace?" Beverly said from the doorway. Grace looked up. "Grandma Beverly?" Beverly crossed the room and gathered her granddaughter into a gentle hug. "Oh, my sweet girl. Look at you. Sitting up. With color in your cheeks. Richard told me you were improving, but I needed to see for myself." "I'm eating again," Grace said proudly. "Tanya helps me." Beverly turned to look at Tanya for the first time. Her gaze was assessing, taking in everything. The bright blue uniform. The kind face. The natural way Tanya held herself around Grace, protective but not smothering. "You're Tanya Morrison," Beverly said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. My son speaks very highly of you. He says you've worked a miracle." "No miracle," Tanya said simply. "Just patience and understanding." Beverly studied her for a long moment. "May I speak with you privately?" Tanya glanced at Grace, who nodded. "It's okay. I want to rest anyway." They moved into the hallway, closing the door behind them. Beverly leaned against the wall, suddenly looking her age, the polished exterior cracking. "I need to know something," Beverly said. "Are you doing this for the money? The bonus Richard promised you?" Tanya could have lied. Could have said something noble. But she'd learned that honesty was always better, even when it was uncomfortable. "Initially, yes," she said. "The money would help my grandmother get better care. But now I'm doing it because I care about Grace. Because I see myself in her. Because no child should have to carry that much grief alone." Beverly's expression softened slightly. "You lost your mother young. A 12? Heart attack. And your father?" "Never knew him. My grandmother raised me." Beverly nodded slowly. "Grace needs someone who understands. Someone who has walked through fire themselves." The therapists, they meant well, but they were treating her like a case study. "You're treating her like a person." "She is a person," Tanya said. "A person who's been through something terrible and needs time to heal." "How long do you think it will take?" Tanya shook her head. "I don't know. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. But I think she's turned a corner. She wants to live now. She just needs help remembering how." Beverly was quiet for a moment, then said something unexpected. "My daughter-in-law was a wonderful mother. But I was so focused on Richard's business, on maintaining appearances, that I didn't spend as much time with Grace as I should have. And now Rebecca's gone and I've missed years I can't get back." "You're here now," Tanya said gently. "That's what matters. I'd like to visit regularly. If that's acceptable. I think Grace would love that." Beverly reached out and squeezed Tanya's hand. "Thank you. For giving me another chance at being a better grandmother. And for giving Grace a reason to fight." That evening, Beverly stayed for dinner. They ate in Grace's room, a small table set up by the window. Nancy had prepared chicken soup with vegetables, and Grace managed almost a full cup. "This is delicious, Nancy," Beverly said when the cook came to check on them. "You haven't lost your touch." Nancy beamed. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. It's good to cook for Miss Grace again. I miss seeing her enjoy food." After dinner, Beverly told Grace stories about Rebecca. Happy stories. Funny stories. Stories about when Rebecca was young and reckless and full of life. "Did you know your mother once dyed her hair bright green?" Beverly said. "She was 16 and thought it would be rebellious. It was hideous. She cried for 3 days until we could fix it." Grace giggled. Actually giggled. The sound was like bells after months of silence. "Mommy had green hair?" Grace asked in disbelief. "Bright green. Like a leprechaun. Your grandfather threatened to disown her." Beverly smiled at the memory. But of course he didn't. He loved her too much. We all did. Grace's expression turned serious. Do you miss her, Grandma? Every single day, Beverly said honestly. She was my only daughter. My baby. Losing her is the hardest thing I've ever experienced. But I still have you. And you remind me so much of her. Your smile. Your kindness. Your stubborn streak. Mommy was stubborn? The most stubborn person I ever met. Once she decided something, nothing could change her mind. Grace thought about this. I've been stubborn too. About not eating. About not talking. You were grieving, Beverly said. There's nothing wrong with that. But I made everyone sad. I made Daddy scared. Tanya spoke up. Grace, grief makes us do things we wouldn't normally do. It's not your fault. You were hurting and you were trying to survive the only way you knew how. But I'm better now, Grace said. I'm going to keep getting better. For Daddy. And for Grandma. And for Mommy's memory. Beverly's eyes filled with tears. Your mother would be so proud of you. After Beverly left, Tanya helped Grace get ready for bed. The nightly routine had become comfortable, familiar. Pajamas, teeth brushing, story time. Small rituals that gave structure to days that had once been formless and empty. Tanya? Grace said as Tanya tucked her in. Can I ask you something hard? Of course. When your mom died, were you angry at her? For leaving? Tanya sat on the edge of the bed, considering her answer carefully. Yes, she said honestly. I was furious. I kept thinking, how could she leave me? How could she die and leave me all alone? It felt like she had chosen to go, even though I knew that was ridiculous. She didn't choose to have a heart attack. I'm angry at my mom sometimes, Grace whispered. For dying. For leaving me. And then I feel so guilty because she didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. Being angry at someone you love who died doesn't make you a bad person, Tanya said. It makes you human. And the guilt you feel shows how much you loved her. Only people who really love each other feel that kind of guilt. Did the anger go away? Eventually. It took a long time. But one day I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad. And then later I wasn't quite as sad. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became something I could carry without it crushing me. Grace was quiet for a moment. I want to get there. To the place where it doesn't hurt so much. You will, Tanya promised. It takes time, but you will. And I'll be here to help you. How long will you stay? Daddy's contract says 3 months. What happens after that? Tanya's heart clenched. She hadn't let herself think that far ahead. I don't know. But we don't have to worry about that now. Right now, let's just focus on today. Okay, Grace said. Tanya? Will you sing me a lullaby? Mommy used to sing to me every night. I'm not a very good singer, Tanya warned. I don't care. So Tanya sang an old gospel song her grandmother used to sing, her voice soft and slightly off-key. Grace's eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out into sleep. Tanya stood to leave, but Grace's small hand caught hers. Don't go yet. Just sit with me for a little while. Okay, sweetheart. Tanya sat in the chair beside the bed, holding Grace's hand, watching her sleep. In the dim light of the bedside lamp, Grace looked peaceful. Younger. Like the weight she'd been carrying had finally lifted enough for her to breathe. A soft knock on the door made Tanya look up. Richard stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his suit jacket gone. Is she asleep? He whispered. Tanya nodded. Richard came into the room and stood beside the bed, looking down at his daughter with such love it was almost painful to witness. I never knew if I'd see her like this again, he said quietly. Peaceful. Healthy. I was so afraid I'd lose her the same way I lost Rebecca. You're not going to lose her, Tanya said. She's fighting now. She's choosing to live. Richard looked at Tanya, his expression unreadable. Because of you. Because of herself. I just helped her remember that she could. Don't downplay what you've done. You saved her life. Tanya stood, gently releasing Grace's hand. She saved her own life. I just held the door open. They moved into the hallway, leaving Grace's door slightly ajar so they could hear if she called out. I have something for you, Richard said. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. The first bonus. $50,000. For getting Grace to eat again. Tanya took the envelope with shaking hands. $50,000. More money than she'd ever held at once. Enough to pay off her grandmother's nursing home bills with money left over. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You earned it. And there's more coming when she's fully recovered. Mr. Bennett? Richard, he interrupted. Please. After everything, I think we've moved past formalities. Richard, Tanya corrected. I need you to know something. I'm not doing this just for the money anymore. Grace has become important to me. I care about her. I know, Richard said. I can see it in the way you look at her. The way you talk to her. You love her. I do, Tanya admitted. I didn't expect to, but I do. Richard moved closer, close enough that Tanya could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. I'm grateful every day that you walked through our door. You've given me my daughter back. You've given me hope. There was something in his eyes, something that made Tanya's heart beat faster. But she pushed it away. She was an employee. He was her boss. And Grace needed stability, not complications. I should go, Tanya said. Let you have time with Grace. Tanya? Richard said as she turned to leave. I know the contract says 3 months, but I hope you'll consider staying longer. Grace needs you. And, he paused. I think we all do. Tanya didn't trust herself to answer. She just nodded and hurried to her room, closing the door behind her. She sat on her bed and opened the envelope, looking at the check inside. $50,000. Life-changing money. Freedom from the crushing weight of debt. But as she held it, she realized something. The money wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was the little girl sleeping in the next room. The little girl who had started to smile again. The little girl who called her name when she was scared. What mattered was love. And love, Tanya was learning, couldn't be bought or sold. It could only be given freely with an open heart and steady hands. And for the first time in a long time, Tanya felt like her heart was finally opening again. Finally learning to trust that maybe, just maybe, good things could last. 2 weeks after Tanya arrived, Grace walked downstairs for the first time since her mother's funeral. It took 20 minutes to navigate the staircase, with Tanya supporting her the entire way. Grace's legs trembled with each step, her muscles weak from months of disuse. But she made it. And when she reached the bottom, she looked up at the chandelier in the entrance hall with tears in her eyes. Mommy picked that out, she said. She said it looked like frozen stars. She had beautiful taste, Tanya said. They walked slowly through the house, Grace pointing out things her mother had chosen or loved. The painting in the living room. The blue vase in the library. The piano in the music room that Rebecca had played every evening. Can I try? Grace asked, looking at the piano. Of course. Grace sat on the bench and tentatively pressed one key. The note rang out clear and bright in the quiet house. She pressed another. Then another. Not a song, just random notes. But each one sounded like a small declaration of life. Richard found them there an hour later. Grace was still at the piano, picking out notes, while Tanya sat nearby reading a book. The scene was so normal, so domestic, so full of simple joy that Richard stood in the doorway just watching, afraid to break the spell. Daddy, Grace said when she finally noticed him. Listen. She played 3 notes in sequence. That's Mary Had a Little Lamb. Mommy taught me. That's beautiful, sweetheart. I forgot how nice music sounds. Grace played the notes again. I forgot how nice everything sounds when you're not too sad to hear it. Richard crossed the room and sat beside her on the piano bench. Your mother wanted you to take piano lessons. She said you had natural talent. Can I start lessons again? Whenever you're ready. Grace looked at Tanya. Will you sit with me during lessons? I don't want to do it alone yet. I'll sit with you, Tanya promised. For as long as you need. That afternoon, Tanya's grandmother arrived for her visit. Tanya waited nervously by the front door, watching as a sleek black car pulled up the circular driveway. A driver got out and carefully helped an elderly black woman from the back seat. Tanya's grandmother, Dorothy Morrison, was 82 years old with white hair and dark skin that had creased into hundreds of laugh lines over the years. She moved slowly, aided by a walker, but her eyes were sharp and aware. Grandma, Tanya said, hurrying down the steps to embrace her. Baby girl, Dorothy said, her voice warm and familiar. Look at this fancy house. You living like a queen now. I'm working here, Grandma. Taking care of a little girl. That what they calling it? Dorothy looked at the mansion with interest. This some kind of job. Must pay good. It does. Come inside. I want you to meet Grace. They moved slowly through the house to a small sitting room Mrs. Patterson had prepared. Grace was already there, perched on a green chair, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous. Grace, this is my grandmother Dorothy, Tanya said. Grandma, this is Grace Bennett. Dorothy settled into a comfortable armchair and looked at Grace with the kind of direct gaze that sees through all pretense. You're the one who stopped eating, Dorothy said bluntly. Grace's eyes widened. Yes, ma'am. I did that once too. When my husband died. Your great-grandfather? Dorothy said to Tanya. I didn't eat for 10 days. Thought if I just stopped taking care of myself, maybe I'd disappear too. Join him wherever he went. Grace leaned forward slightly. What made you start eating again? This one right here, Dorothy said, pointing at Tanya. She was just a baby, maybe 3 years old. And one morning she climbed up on my bed and said, Grandma, I'm hungry. Just like that. And I realized that if I didn't eat, I couldn't take care of her. And she needed me more than I needed to stay sad. I'm hungry, Grace repeated softly. That's a good reason. The best reason. Living for the people who need you. Living because there's still love in the world even when it hurts. They talked for an hour. Dorothy told stories about Tanya as a child, about the trouble she got into, the questions she asked, the way she tried to take care of everyone around her even when she was tiny. She's always been a healer, Dorothy said. Even when she didn't know that's what she was. After her mama died, she'd go around the neighborhood checking on folks, making sure they had what they needed. She was 12 years old acting like somebody's grandmother. Did you ever forget what Tanya's mom looked like? Grace asked suddenly. Because I'm starting to forget my mom's face. I see pictures, but I can't remember what she really looked like when she was just being normal. Dorothy's expression turned gentle. I remember my daughter-in-law's face clear as day. But you're right, some details get fuzzy. The exact shade of her lipstick. The way her hair looked in the morning. But what I never forget is how she made me feel. How she'd hug me like she meant it. How she'd laugh at my terrible jokes. Feelings stay sharper than pictures, baby. You hold on to how your mama made you feel, and you'll never really lose her. Grace thought about this. She made me feel safe. Like nothing bad could happen as long as she was there. And then something bad did happen, Dorothy said. And now you got to learn that you can be safe even without her. That's the hardest lesson. But Tanya here, she learning you that. Teaching you that it's okay to trust the world again. After Dorothy left, Grace was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said to Tanya, Your grandma is really smart. She is. And she's sick, right? With her mind? She has dementia. Most days she doesn't remember much. Today was a good day. I'm glad I got to meet her on a good day. Grace paused. Tanya, can I tell you something? Anything. I'm scared that when I get all better you'll leave. That you'll go back to your real life and forget about me. Tanya pulled Grace into a gentle hug. I could never forget about you. You've become one of the most important people in my life. Really? Really? And I'm not going anywhere until you're completely healed. Body, heart, and soul. That night, Richard knocked on Tanya's door around 9 o'clock. She opened it to find him still in his work clothes, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed. Can we talk? He asked. Of course. Come in. He entered her room, looking around at the simple space she'd made her own. A few photos of her grandmother on the nightstand. Some books from the mansion's library stacked on the desk. A bright red sweater hanging in the open closet. My mother called me today, Richard said. She's planning a dinner party next month. A small gathering of family and close friends. She wants Grace to attend. And she specifically requested that you be there as well. Not as staff. As a guest. Tanya's stomach fluttered with nervousness. I don't think that's appropriate. I work for you. You're more than that now. You're part of Grace's recovery. Part of her life. And, Richard paused, choosing his words carefully, you're becoming important to me too. As a person. Not just as an employee. Richard. I know it's complicated, he said quickly. I know there are power dynamics and professional boundaries. But I need you to know that I see you. Not as the maid or the nurse. As Tanya. As a remarkable woman who walked into our broken home and helped us start to heal. Tanya's heart raced. I appreciate that. But Grace needs stability right now. She needs consistency. Getting involved in anything complicated would risk that. I'm not asking for anything complicated. I'm just asking you to consider staying. After the contract ends. Grace loves you. And I. He stopped. I value you. Your presence. Your wisdom. Everything you've brought into our lives. I'll think about it, Tanya said softly. But right now, let's just focus on Grace. Richard nodded. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Thank you. For today. For bringing your grandmother here. For letting Grace see that healing is possible. For everything. After he left, Tanya sat on her bed and put her face in her hands. This was getting complicated. Richard was handsome, kind, clearly attracted to her. And she'd be lying if she said she didn't feel something too. But Grace had to come first. Grace, who was just starting to smile again. Grace, who still woke up sometimes crying for her mother. Grace, who needed Tanya to be steady and constant and uncomplicated. So Tanya made a decision. She would stay professional. She would keep her distance from Richard. She would focus entirely on helping Grace heal. And when the 3 months were up, she would reassess. But not before. Because love, even when it knocks on your door with a bouquet and a smile, sometimes needs to wait in the hallway. Sometimes patience is the greatest act of love there is. What would you do if you had to choose between following your heart and protecting someone who depends on you? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the choices that change everything. 3 weeks into Tanya's stay, Grace ate a full meal for the first time. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Normal portions. No forcing, no tears, no struggle. Nancy cried when she cleared the empty dinner plate. "I thought I'd never see this day again," she said, hugging Grace tight. "You're going to be just fine, baby girl." Dr. Foster confirmed it during her next visit. Her weight is stabilizing. Blood work looks good. Her body is healing. She looked at Tanya with professional respect. "Whatever you're doing, it's working better than anything we tried." "I'm just being her friend," Tanya said. That's all she needed. Someone to sit with her in the darkness until she was ready to see light again. That afternoon, Grace asked if she could go outside. Actually outside, into the garden she'd been watching from her window for weeks. "Are you sure you're strong enough?" Tanya asked. "I don't know. But I want to try." They walked through the mansion slowly, Grace leaning on Tanya's arm. Mrs. Patterson watched them go with tears in her eyes. Nancy waved from the kitchen window. Even the gardener stopped his work to watch the little girl who hadn't left the house in months finally step into sunlight. Grace stood on the back patio for a long moment just breathing. The air smells different outside. Like grass and flowers and life. "It does," Tanya agreed. They walked to a bench near the rose garden. Grace sat down carefully, tilting her face up to catch the sun. "This is nice. I forgot how nice warm feels. We can come out here every day if you want. Build up your strength." "I'd like that." Grace looked at the roses blooming in every color. "Mommy planted these." Well, she told the gardeners what to plant. She said a garden should have every color of the rainbow because life is supposed to be colorful. She was right. Grace plucked a petal that had fallen onto the bench. "Do you think she can see me? Right now? Do you think she knows I'm getting better? I think if there's any way to see the people we love from wherever we go after death, she's watching. And I think she's proud of you." "I hope so." Grace put the petal in her pocket. "I'm going to save this. To remember today. The day I came back to life." Richard joined them 20 minutes later, having rushed home from work when Mrs. Patterson called to tell him Grace was outside. He looked at his daughter sitting in the sunshine, color in her cheeks, life in her eyes, and had to turn away to compose himself. "Hey, Daddy," Grace called. "Come sit with us." He walked over and sat on Grace's other side. "Look at you. Outside. Getting fresh air. Tanya helped me. She helps me with everything." Richard looked past Grace to Tanya. "She certainly does." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching butterflies dance among the roses. It was a perfect moment, the kind that feels suspended in time, like if you're very still, you might be able to hold on to it forever. "Can I ask you both something?" Grace said eventually. "Of course," Richard said. "What happens when I get all the way better? When I don't need help anymore?" "What do you mean, sweetheart? Will things go back to how they were before? Will it just be you and me in this big house?" Richard's expression grew careful. "Would that make you sad?" "Yes," Grace said honestly. "I like having Tanya here. I like it when we all eat together. I like feeling like we're a family." Richard and Tanya exchanged glances over Grace's head. "Grace," Tanya said gently, "families come in all different shapes. Sometimes the people who aren't related to us become just as important as the people who are." "So you could stay? Even after I'm better?" "We'll figure it out," Richard said, not committing but not refusing either. "Right now, let's just focus on getting you strong and healthy." "Okay," Grace said. But she took both their hands, Tanya's on one side and Richard's on the other, and held tight. That evening, Beverly arrived again, having made it her mission to visit Grace 3 times a week. She brought gifts each time. Today it was a music box that played a soft melody. "This was your mother's," Beverly said, giving it to Grace. "I want you to have it now." Grace wound the key and listened to the music. "It's beautiful. Your mother got it when she was about your age. She loved music boxes. She had a whole collection." "Where are they now?" Beverly's expression grew sad. I have them. In storage. But I think it's time you had them. All of her special things. They belong to you. Can we set them up in my room? We can set them up wherever you want. Grace looked at Tanya. Will you help me decide where to put them? Of course. They spent the next hour talking about Rebecca, sharing memories, keeping her alive through words. Beverly told funny stories. Grace shared little memories she'd been scared to voice before. Richard talked about how he'd fallen in love with Rebecca, how she'd changed his whole world. She made everything better, Richard said. Just by being in the room. She had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she talked to you. Grace has that quality too, Tanya said. That gift of making people feel seen. She got it from her mother, Beverly agreed. After Beverly left, Tanya helped Grace get ready for bed. The routine was comfortable now, familiar. No more struggle, no more tears. Just a child preparing for sleep like any other child. Tanya? Grace said as she climbed into bed. I've been thinking about something. What's that? You've been teaching me that it's okay to live without Mommy. That I can be happy again even though she's gone. And I think you're right. I think Mommy would want me to be happy. She absolutely would. But I was wondering, does that mean it's okay for Daddy to be happy too? Like with someone new someday? Tanya's breath caught. This was dangerous territory. What makes you ask that? I see how he looks at you sometimes. The way he smiles when you're in the room. And I was just thinking that maybe you could make him happy. The way Mommy did. Grace, honey, your father and I work together. It's complicated. Why is it complicated? You're both grown-ups. You both like each other. I can tell. Because I'm here to help you. That's my job. And mixing that up with other feelings could make things messy. Grace considered this seriously. But what if the feelings are already there? What if trying to ignore them makes things messy? Out of the mouths of children. Sometimes they saw the truth more clearly than adults ever could. Let me ask you something, Tanya said. If your father and I were to spend more time together, in a different way, would that upset you? Would it feel like we were trying to replace your mother? No, Grace said immediately. Because nobody could replace Mommy. She's irreplaceable. But that doesn't mean there's no room for new love. Grandma Beverly told me that hearts don't have limited space. They expand to hold all the love we need. Your grandmother is very wise. So are you. And so is Daddy. And I think you'd both be happier if you stopped pretending you don't care about each other. Tanya couldn't help but smile. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. I was just too sad to show it before. Grace yawned. Will you think about what I said? Please? I'll think about it. Good. Grace's eyes drifted closed. Love you, Tanya. It was the first time she'd said it. Those 3 simple words. And they hit Tanya like a physical force. I love you too, sweetheart, Tanya whispered. So much. She sat with Grace until she fell asleep, then walked downstairs to find Richard in his office, working late as usual. She's asleep, Tanya said from the doorway. Richard looked up from his laptop. Come in. Please. Tanya entered and sat in the leather chair across from his desk. Grace asked me something interesting tonight. Oh. She wanted to know if it would be okay for you to be happy again. With someone new. She's very perceptive. Richard's expression grew guarded. What did you tell her? That it's complicated. That you and I work together. That mixing professional and personal could create problems. But she made a good point. She said that hearts expand to hold all the love we need. That her mother can never be replaced, but that doesn't mean there's no room for new love. Richard stood and came around the desk. He leaned against it, close to where Tanya sat but not too close. What do you think? Do you believe that? I don't know. I've spent the last 3 years focused on taking care of my grandmother and working jobs that paid the bills. I haven't let myself think about relationships or love or any of that. Why not? Because I was scared. When you lose the people you love, when they die or leave or disappear, it makes you afraid to care that deeply again. It's safer to keep everyone at arm's length. But that's not really living, is it? Richard said softly. That's just surviving. No, it's not. Tanya looked up at him. Grace is teaching me that. She's showing me that yes, love can hurt. Yes, loss is terrible. But closing yourself off from love because you're afraid of loss means you miss out on all the beautiful parts too. So what do we do about this? Richard gestured between them, acknowledging the unspoken tension that had been building for weeks. We're honest, Tanya said. I care about you. More than I probably should. More than is entirely professional. But Grace comes first. Her healing, her stability, her happiness. That's non-negotiable. I agree completely. So we take this slow. We don't hide how we feel, but we don't rush anything either. We let it develop naturally at a pace that feels safe for Grace. That sounds reasonable. Richard smiled. Also terrifying. The best things usually are. He held out his hand. Friends first? Real friends, not just employer and employee? She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. Friends first. But as she left his office and climbed the stairs to her room, she knew it was already more than friendship. It was the beginning of something bigger. Something that had the potential to heal all of them or break them completely. She just had to trust that kindness and hope and love would guide them in the right direction. And trust, after so many years of being afraid, was the hardest thing of all. By the end of the first month, Grace was well enough to leave the house. Dr. Foster cleared her for short trips, as long as she didn't overexert herself. Their first destination was the library. Grace had been an avid reader before her mother died, and Tanya thought it might be good for her to reconnect with that joy. They drove there together, Grace sitting in the back seat of Richard's car while Tanya sat beside her. Richard had insisted on driving them himself, canceling 2 meetings to make it happen. Grace pressed her face to the window as they drove through town. Everything looks the same. But different. Like I'm seeing it for the first time. That's because you're seeing it with grateful eyes, Tanya said. When we're grateful just to be alive, even ordinary things look beautiful. The library was a beautiful old building with high ceilings and stained glass windows. Grace walked through the children's section with wonder, running her fingers along the spines of books. Can I get any books I want? She asked. As many as you can carry, Richard said. Grace selected 7 books. Stories about adventures and magic and brave children who overcame impossible things. At checkout, the librarian smiled at her. I haven't seen you in a while, Grace, the woman said kindly. I've been sick, Grace said simply. But I'm better now. I'm glad. We missed you. On the drive home, Grace opened one of the books and started reading immediately. She looked so normal, so healthy that Tanya had to blink back tears. This child who'd been dying just a month ago was now lost in a story, completely absorbed, completely alive. That evening, Richard asked Tanya to join him for dinner after Grace went to bed. Not in the dining room with the formal table and china. In the kitchen, at the small breakfast table where the staff usually ate. Nancy had left them a simple meal. Roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Nothing fancy. Just good food shared in a comfortable space. I wanted to thank you, Richard said as they ate. For everything you've done for Grace. For our family. You've thanked me many times, Tanya said. I know. But I'm not sure you understand the magnitude of what you've accomplished. You didn't just get Grace eating again. You gave her hope. You taught her how to live with grief. You showed her that it's possible to be happy even when your heart is broken. She taught herself that. I just walked beside her while she figured it out. Richard shook his head. You're too modest. But I'll let you have your humility if it makes you comfortable. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Richard said, My mother's dinner party is in 2 weeks. Will you come? As a guest, not as staff. Richard. Please. Grace wants you there. My mother wants you there. And I want you there. Not because you work for us, but because you're important to us. To all of us. Tanya set down her fork. If I come as a guest, people will ask questions. They'll wonder who I am. What my relationship is to your family. Let them wonder. That's easy for you to say. You're Richard Bennett, tech billionaire. I'm Tanya Morrison, the help. People will judge. Let them judge. I don't care what other people think. I care about what's right. And it's right for you to be there, standing beside Grace as she takes another step forward in her healing. Tanya wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons why this was a bad idea. But looking at Richard's earnest face, his honest eyes, she couldn't find the words. Okay, she said finally. I'll come. For Grace. And maybe a little bit for me? Richard asked with a small smile. Maybe a little bit, Tanya admitted. The next week passed in a blur of normal activities. Grace grew stronger every day. She started going for short walks around the property. She began eating regular meals without any prompting. She laughed more. She played more. She was transforming back into a regular child, albeit one who had lived through extraordinary pain. Dr. Foster reduced her visits to once a week. I don't think I'm needed much anymore, she said. Grace is healthy. Physically and mentally. It's remarkable. The psychologist, Dr. Patel, came for a session with Grace. She spent an hour talking with her, then emerged looking amazed. That child has done more healing in 4 weeks than most people do in a year of therapy, Dr. Patel told Richard. Whatever Miss Morrison is doing, it's working. She's just being present, Richard said. Just loving Grace without conditions or expectations. That's more powerful than any therapy technique, Dr. Patel agreed. 3 days before the dinner party, Beverly arrived with a surprise. She brought boxes of Rebecca's belongings. The music boxes, yes, but also photo albums, journals, favorite books, pieces of jewelry. I thought it was time, Beverly said. Time for Grace to have her mother's things. To keep them close. They spent the afternoon going through everything. Grace held each item carefully, reverently. She read passages from Rebecca's journals. She looked at photos of her mother as a young woman before Grace was born. She looked so happy, Grace said, studying a picture of Rebecca laughing at something off camera. She was happy, Beverly said. Especially after you were born. You were her greatest joy. Grace put the photo in a frame and set it on her nightstand. I want to see her face first thing when I wake up and last thing before I sleep. So I never forget. You won't forget, baby, Beverly said. Not now. Not ever. That night, Grace asked Richard and Tanya to both tuck her in together. They stood on either side of her bed, both helping with the bedtime routine. This feels nice, Grace said sleepily. Like a real family. Richard and Tanya exchanged glances over her head. We are a real family, Richard said. Maybe not traditional. But real. I like our family, Grace murmured. Don't let it change. After she fell asleep, Richard walked Tanya to her room. They stood in the hallway, the space between them charged with unspoken things. She's right, Richard said quietly. This does feel like family. It does, Tanya agreed. But families are complicated. They require work and trust and patience. I'm willing to do that work. Are you? Tanya looked at this man who had opened his home to her, who trusted her with his daughter's life, who looked at her like she was something precious. I'm willing, she said. But we have to be smart about it. We have to think about Grace first. Always, Richard agreed. He reached out and took her hand. Whatever this becomes, we do it together. The three of us. The three of us, Tanya echoed. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you. For taking a chance on us. For staying when others left. For being exactly what we needed. After he left, Tanya stood in her room, her heart racing. This was really happening. She was falling in love with Richard Bennett. And more importantly, she was falling in love with the family they were becoming. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was everything she'd been afraid to hope for. But Grace's words echoed in her mind. Hearts don't have limited space. They expand to hold all the love we need. Maybe it was time to let her heart expand. Time to trust that love didn't have to end in loss. Time to believe that sometimes broken people could find each other and build something whole. The dinner party was in 2 days. And somehow Tanya knew it would be a turning point. For all of them. The night of Beverly's dinner party arrived with perfect weather. Warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that made the trees whisper. Tanya stood in her room looking at herself in the mirror. Beverly had insisted on sending over a dress, a beautiful emerald green gown that fit like it had been made for her. Nancy had helped with her hair, styling it into an elegant updo. She looked like someone who belonged at a billionaire's dinner party. But inside she felt like an imposter. A knock on her door made her turn. Grace stood there, dressed in a pretty maroon dress with her hair curled. She looked healthy, vibrant, completely transformed from the pale ghost of a child Tanya had met 5 weeks ago. You look beautiful, Grace said. Like a princess. Thank you, sweetheart. You look pretty beautiful yourself. Grace came into the room and sat on the bed. Are you nervous? About tonight? A little. These aren't my people, Grace. I don't know how to act at fancy parties. Just be yourself. That's all anyone needs you to be. Tanya smiled. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. I just forgot for a while. Grace paused. Tanya? Thank you. For everything. For saving my life. For teaching me that it's okay to be happy again. For loving me. Tanya knelt in front of Grace and took her small hands. You saved yourself, honey. You made the choice to live. I just stood beside you while you did. Can I tell you a secret? Always. I've been praying. Asking God to let you stay forever. Asking Him to make you part of our family for real. Do you think He'll listen? Tanya's eyes filled with tears. I think God always listens. But sometimes he has plans we don't understand. Whatever happens, I promise I'll always be in your life. Always. Good. Because I need you. Grace hugged her tight. Come on. Daddy's waiting downstairs. He looks really handsome. You should see. They walked downstairs together, Grace holding Tanya's hand. Richard was indeed waiting in the entrance hall, wearing a navy blue suit that made his gray eyes look almost silver. He looked up when they appeared on the staircase and his expression transformed. Tanya. You look stunning. Thank you, she said, suddenly shy. Doesn't she look like a princess, Daddy? Grace asked. She does indeed. A car took them to Beverly's estate, an even larger mansion than Richard's. The driveway was lined with expensive vehicles. Music drifted from inside, along with the sound of laughter and conversation. Ready? Richard asked, offering Tanya his arm. As I'll ever be. They entered together, the three of them forming a small unit. Beverly greeted them immediately, resplendent in a silver gown. There's my beautiful granddaughter, she said, hugging Grace. And Tanya, you look magnificent. That color is perfect for you. Thank you for the dress, Mrs. Bennett. Please call me Beverly. We're past formalities. She lowered her voice. I've told everyone you're a family friend. That should keep the busybodies from asking too many questions. The party was everything Tanya expected. Elegant food, expensive wine, people dressed in designer clothes talking about stocks and investments and vacations in exotic locations. But Grace stayed close to Tanya's side and Richard never strayed far. They moved through the party as a unit and slowly Tanya began to relax. A woman approached them, someone Beverly introduced as an old friend named Patricia. She looked at Grace with kind eyes. Beverly tells me you've been ill, Patricia said to Grace. But you look wonderfully healthy now. I am, Grace said. Tanya helped me get better. Patricia looked at Tanya with interest. Oh, are you a doctor? I used to be a nurse, Tanya said. Now I just help where I'm needed. Tanya is being modest, Richard said, his hand finding the small of Tanya's back. She's the reason my daughter is alive and healthy today. The possessive way he said it, the protective touch, made Patricia's eyebrows rise slightly. But she smiled. How wonderful. Grace is lucky to have you. They moved through the party, Grace occasionally needing to sit and rest, but mostly doing remarkably well. She talked to Beverly's friends, told them about her mother, shared memories with a smile rather than tears. She's handling this well, Tanya said quietly to Richard while Grace was talking to Beverly across the room. Because she knows she's safe. She knows if she needs to leave, we'll leave. No judgment, no pressure. You're a good father. I'm trying to be. I made a lot of mistakes after Rebecca died. I was so lost in my own grief that I didn't see how badly Grace was drowning. If you hadn't come along. But I did come along. That's what matters. Richard looked at her, really looked at her. I need to tell you something. Something I've been wanting to say for weeks. Richard. I'm falling in love with you, Tanya. Maybe I already have fallen. I know it's complicated. I know there are challenges ahead. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Tanya's breath caught. This isn't the time or place. I know. But I needed you to hear it. Because watching you tonight, watching you interact with Grace, watching you be brave and beautiful in yourself, I realized I don't want to hide it anymore. I care about you too, Tanya admitted. But we have to be smart. We have to think about what's best for Grace. Grace wants this. She's told me. She wants you to stay. She wants us to be a family. But what happens when I disappoint you? When the reality of who I am doesn't match up to what you think I am? Then we work through it. Like any family does. Together. Before Tanya could respond, Grace appeared at their side. Grandma wants to take a picture. All three of us together. They posed for the camera, Grace in the middle, Richard and Tanya on either side. Beverly snapped several photos, her eyes shining with something that looked like hope. Perfect, she said. You all look perfect together. As the party wound down, Richard asked Tanya to walk with him in Beverly's garden. They left Grace inside with Beverly, who was teaching her granddaughter how to play bridge. The garden was lit with soft lights, creating pools of illumination among the flowers and trees. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a fountain in the center of the garden. I meant what I said earlier, Richard said. About falling in love with you. I know you did. And I need you to know that I feel the same way. But Richard, I'm scared. Of what? Of messing this up. Of hurting Grace if this doesn't work out. Of losing everything I've gained over the past month. Richard took her hands. What if, instead of focusing on all the ways this could go wrong, we focus on all the ways it could go right. What if we trust that maybe, just maybe, we're being given a second chance at happiness? You make it sound so simple. It is simple. We care about each other. We both love Grace. We all want the same thing, which is to be a family. The logistics can be figured out as we go. Tanya looked up at him, at his honest eyes and open face. Okay. Okay, let's try this. Let's see where it goes. But we do it slowly. We do it carefully. And Grace stays the priority. Always, Richard agreed. Then he leaned down and kissed her. Soft and gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Tanya was crying. Happy tears this time. I never thought I'd feel this way again, she whispered. After my mother died, after years of just surviving, I thought maybe joy was something that happened to other people. Not to me. You deserve every bit of joy the world has to offer, Richard said. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend my time showing you that. They walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Inside, Grace took one look at their joined hands and beamed. Finally, she said. I thought you two would never figure it out. Beverly laughed. Out of the mouths of children. On the drive home, Grace fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from her first big social event since her mother's death. Richard carried her into the house and up to her room. Together, he and Tanya got her into pajamas and tucked her into bed. Grace opened her eyes briefly. Love you both, she murmured. Love you too, sweetheart, they said in unison. In the hallway, Richard pulled Tanya close. Is this real? He asked. Are we really doing this? I think we are. I'm terrified. Me too. But it's the good kind of terrified, right? The kind that means you're taking a chance on something that matters? The very best kind, Tanya agreed. Because sometimes love appears in the aftermath of tragedy. Sometimes it grows in the space where grief used to live. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, broken people find each other and realize that together they can be whole. 3 months after Tanya arrived, Grace returned to school. It was a momentous day filled with nervous energy and excitement. Grace wore a bright red dress and new shoes. Her backpack was filled with fresh supplies. She looked like any other 6-year-old heading to first grade, except she'd lived through more pain than most children could imagine. What if I don't remember how to be around other kids? Grace asked at breakfast. You'll remember, Tanya assured her. It's like riding a bike. It comes back. What if they ask about mommy? Richard put down his coffee. You tell them whatever feels comfortable. If you want to talk about her, you can. If you don't, that's okay too. But be honest, Tanya added. Kids respect honesty. If you're sad, it's okay to say so. Grace nodded seriously. Okay. I can do this. Nancy packed her a special lunch, complete with a note that said, You're braver than you know. Love, Nancy. Tanya and Richard both drove Grace to school, neither willing to miss this milestone. They walked her to her classroom where her teacher, Mrs. Ramirez, greeted them warmly. Welcome back, Grace, Mrs. Ramirez said. We've missed you. Grace took a deep breath and walked into the classroom. She turned back once to wave at Tanya and Richard, then joined a group of children playing with blocks. In the car on the way home, Richard reached for Tanya's hand. She's going to be okay. I know. But I'm still worried. Me too. They'd been officially together for 2 months now. Not hiding it, not announcing it, just living it. Grace was delighted. Beverly was supportive. Even Mrs. Patterson and Nancy had stopped looking surprised when Richard kissed Tanya goodbye before leaving for work. The contract had expired 3 weeks ago, but Tanya hadn't left. Instead, Richard had made her a different offer. Stay permanently. Not as staff but as family. With her own suite of rooms, her own space, no strings attached except the ones they were building together. She'd said yes without hesitation. That afternoon, Tanya visited her grandmother at the nursing home. Dorothy was having a good day, alert and aware. Tell me about this man, Dorothy said. This Richard Bennett. He's kind. Smart. Loves his daughter more than anything. And he treats you right? Better than I ever thought possible. Dorothy nodded slowly. Your mother would have liked that. She always said you deserved someone who saw your worth. I miss her, Grandma. Especially now when good things are happening. I wish she could see this. She can see it, baby. Wherever she is, she's watching. And she's happy for you. That evening, Richard had arranged something special. A surprise for both Grace and Tanya. When they picked Grace up from school, she was exhausted but happy. School was good, she said. I made 2 friends. They didn't ask about mommy, but I told them anyway. They were really nice about it. I'm proud of you, Tanya said. At home, Richard led them to the back garden. There, in a sunny spot near the roses, was a new memorial. A beautiful stone bench with a plaque that read, "Rebecca Bennett, beloved wife and mother. Her love blooms eternal in this garden and in our hearts." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. "It's perfect, Daddy. I thought we should have a place to remember her," Richard said. "A place where we can come and talk to her, tell her about our days, feel close to her." They sat on the bench together, the three of them, and Grace told Rebecca about her first day back at school. About her new friends. About how Tanya had helped her find courage. "I think you'd like Tanya, Mommy," Grace said to the garden. "I think you'd be happy that she's here. That we're all taking care of each other." After Grace went inside to do homework, Richard and Tanya stayed on the bench. "There's something I want to talk to you about," Richard said. "Something important." Tanya's heart skipped. "Okay. I've been working with my foundation, the one I established in Rebecca's name. We provide grief counseling to families who've lost loved ones. And I was thinking, you could help. Share your story. Help other families the way you helped Grace." "Me? You have a gift, Tanya. You understand grief in a way most people don't. You know how to sit with people in their pain without trying to fix it or rush them through it. That's invaluable. I don't have any formal training in counseling. You don't need it. You have life experience. You have empathy. You have wisdom." Richard paused. "I'm not asking you to give up your time with Grace. I'm asking you to expand your reach. To help more children like Grace find their way back to hope." Tanya thought about it. About Grace's transformation. About her own journey through grief after her mother died. About how desperately she'd needed someone to tell her it was okay to keep living. "I'll do it," she said. "But I'll need training. I'll need to learn how to do this properly. We'll provide whatever training you need. Whatever support." Richard took her hand. "I believe in you, Tanya. I believe you can change lives. You've already changed ours." That night, as Tanya was getting ready for bed, Grace knocked on her door. "Can I talk to you?" Grace asked. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." Grace climbed onto Tanya's bed and curled up against her. "Today was a good day. But it was also hard." "How so?" "Because I realized that life keeps going. Even without Mommy, the world keeps turning. Kids keep playing. Teachers keep teaching. And I'm part of it all again. But she's not. That's a hard realization. But it's also kind of beautiful, isn't it? Like Mommy's not here, but her love is still here. In the garden Daddy made. In the music boxes she left me. In the way you take care of me. Her love keeps going even though she doesn't." "That's exactly right," Tanya said softly. "Love doesn't end when people die. It just changes form. I think that's what you've taught me. That love is bigger than death. Stronger than sadness. And if we're brave enough to let it in, it can heal almost anything." Tanya hugged Grace close. "You're an incredible kid. You know that." "I learned from an incredible person," Grace said. "Then, Tanya? Are you and Daddy going to get married?" The question caught Tanya off guard. Oh, we haven't talked about that. But you want to, right? You love him." "Yes, I love him. And I love you. But marriage is a big step." "Not really," Grace said with childhood simplicity. "You already live here. You already take care of us. You're already part of the family. Marriage would just make it official." "Is that what you want? For us to be official?" "More than anything." Grace looked up at her. "I know you're not trying to replace my mom. Nobody could. But you're giving me a new kind of love. A different kind of love. And I need that. Daddy needs that. We all do." After Grace went to bed, Tanya stood at her window, looking out at the garden where Rebecca's memorial bench sat bathed in moonlight. She thought about everything that had happened in 3 months. How she'd arrived at this mansion desperate for money, broken from years of struggling. How she'd found not just a job but a purpose. Not just employment but family. A soft knock made her turn. Richard stood in the doorway. "Grace just told me she asked you about marriage," he said. "She did. I didn't put her up to it. I swear." "I know." Richard came into the room and took both her hands. "But since the topic has been raised, I have something to ask you. Something I've been thinking about for weeks but didn't know how or when to say." Tanya's heart raced. "Richard, I know it's fast. I know by conventional standards we should wait longer. But Tanya, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You are the missing piece our family needed. You've brought light back into this house. You've given Grace hope and given me a reason to believe in tomorrow." He knelt down and Tanya gasped. "I don't have a ring yet. We can pick one out together if you want." But I need to ask you now in this moment because waiting another day feels impossible. Tanya Morrison, will you marry me? Will you become Grace's mother-in-law as well as in love? Will you build a life with us, here in this house where you've already worked so many miracles? Tanya looked down at this man kneeling before her, his eyes full of love and hope and vulnerability. She thought about Grace sleeping down the hall, her heart finally healed enough to be open again. She thought about the foundation they'd built together, brick by brick, moment by moment. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you. I'll be the family you need, and you'll be the family I never thought I'd have. Richard stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with joy and relief and promise. Thank you. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Thank you for staying when you could have left. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Thank you for seeing me, Tanya whispered. For valuing me. For teaching me that I deserve good things too. They stood in her room holding each other, building dreams for the future. A future that included wedding plans and college funds and family vacations. A future where Grace would grow up knowing she was loved by two parents who chose each other and chose her. A future built on the foundation of kindness, hope, and love. Because those three things, when woven together, could overcome any obstacle. Could heal any wound. Could turn tragedy into triumph. And sometimes, if you were very fortunate, they could give you a second chance at family. At happiness. At life itself. 6 months after Tanya walked through the doors of the Bennett mansion for the first time, she stood in the same entrance hall wearing a white dress. Not an elaborate gown. Just a simple, beautiful dress in ivory white with delicate lace sleeves. Her grandmother's pearls around her neck. Her hair styled naturally the way Grace liked it. Dorothy sat in a wheelchair in the front row, wearing her best Sunday suit. Beverly stood beside her, dabbing her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Nancy and Mrs. Patterson wore matching lavender dresses, their faces glowing with happiness. Dr. Foster had come, as had Dr. Patel. Even Julie, the nurse who'd been there during Grace's darkest days, was present. But the most important person was Grace. She wore a maroon dress covered in flowers, her hair braided with ribbons. She held a basket of rose petals, ready for her role as flower girl. But before that, she had a different role to play. Are you ready? Grace asked Tanya in the small room where they were waiting. I am. Are you? I've been ready since the day you first helped me eat that piece of toast. Grace grinned. That sounds silly, but it's true. I knew even then that you were going to change everything. They walked to the entrance of the living room together. Richard had wanted to keep the wedding intimate, just close family and friends. The ceremony would take place in front of the fireplace, exactly where Rebecca had hung Christmas stockings every year. Some people might have thought it was strange to marry in a house filled with memories of a dead wife. But Richard and Tanya had talked about it extensively. Rebecca was part of their story. Her love had created Grace. Her death had brought Tanya and Richard together. She wasn't being erased or replaced. She was being honored. The music started, a simple piano melody. Grace walked down the makeshift aisle first, scattering rose petals with serious concentration. When she reached Richard, standing at the front with the officiant, she gave him a thumbs up. Then it was Tanya's turn. She walked alone by choice. Dorothy couldn't walk steadily enough to escort her, and she didn't want anyone else. This was her journey to take, her choice to make, her step to claim. Richard's face when he saw her made everything worth it. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt. The way he looked at her, like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered in the darkness. The ceremony was short and sweet. The officiant spoke about second chances and blended families and the courage it takes to love again after loss. Richard and Tanya have both experienced profound grief, the officiant said. They both know what it means to lose someone irreplaceable. But they also know that the human heart is capable of holding infinite love. Rebecca's memory lives on in Grace and in this family. And today they're making space for new love, new commitment, new joy. When it came time for the vows, Richard went first. Tanya, you came into our lives when we were at our lowest. When I was drowning in grief and Grace was slipping away from me. You didn't try to fix us or rush our healing. You just sat with us in the darkness and waited patiently for us to find our own light. You are the kindest, bravest, most remarkable person I've ever met. And I promise to spend every day showing you that you made the right choice in choosing us. In choosing me. I love you. Then it was Tanya's turn. Richard, when I took this job, I thought I was just helping a child. But you both ended up helping me. You reminded me that life is worth living. That love is worth the risk. That families come in all different forms, and what makes them real isn't biology but commitment. I promise to love Grace as my own daughter. I promise to honor Rebecca's memory. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, the good and the hard and everything in between. I love you. I love Grace. I love this family we're building. Grace stepped forward then, having been given permission to speak. I want to make a promise too, she said in her clear child's voice. Tanya, I promise to always tell you the truth. To let you help me when I need it. To remember that you're not replacing my mommy but giving me a different kind of love. And I promise to love you back just as much as you love me. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that caught the afternoon light. When the officiant pronounced them married, Richard kissed Tanya gently, reverently, like she was something precious. Grace threw her arms around both of them. We're a real family now, she said. Official and everything. The reception was held in the back garden, near Rebecca's memorial bench. Tables covered in white cloths. Flowers everywhere. Nancy's incredible cooking laid out buffet style. During dinner, Beverly stood to make a toast. I've known Richard since he was born, she said. I've watched him grow into a man, build a company, fall in love with Rebecca, become a father. And I watched him break when Rebecca died. I didn't think he'd ever be whole again. But then Tanya arrived and she didn't just help Grace heal. She helped Richard remember how to hope. How to love. How to believe in tomorrow. Beverly raised her glass. To Tanya and Richard. May your love be a light in the darkness for everyone who knows you. Dorothy, who was having one of her increasingly rare lucid days, also stood. My granddaughter has been through more pain than any young woman should endure, Dorothy said. But she never let it make her bitter. She stayed kind. She stayed open. And now she's found the family she deserves. Tanya, baby, your mama would be so proud of you. Richard, you're a good man. Take care of my girl. Grace, honey, you're getting the best new mama anyone could ask for. Grace stood on her chair to make her own toast. Tanya taught me that it's okay to be sad and happy at the same time, Grace said. That I can miss my mommy and love my new family. That hearts are big enough to hold all the feelings. So today I'm really happy. But I'm also a little sad because I wish mommy could be here. But I think she is here. In the flowers she planted. In the bench we sit on. In the way we love each other. And I think she's happy for us. As the sun began to set, Richard and Tanya had their first dance. Not to a typical wedding song, but to a song Rebecca had loved. A song about second chances and new beginnings. Are you happy? Richard asked as they swayed together. More than I ever thought possible, Tanya said honestly. Terrified but happy. Why terrified? Because I've never had this much to lose before. You and Grace, this life we're building, it's everything to me. The thought of anything happening to take it away. Nothing is going to take it away, Richard said firmly. We're a family now. Legally, emotionally, completely. Whatever challenges come, we face them together. Promise? I promise. Grace ran up to them. Can I dance too? Richard lifted her up, and the three of them danced together, Grace laughing between them. Other guests joined in, and soon the garden was full of movement and music and joy. Later, when the guest had gone home and Grace had fallen asleep in her bed, exhausted from excitement, Richard and Tanya stood by Rebecca's memorial bench. Do you think she approves? Tanya asked quietly. I do, Richard said. Rebecca loved Grace more than anything. She would want her daughter to be happy, to be healthy, to have a mother figure in her life. And I think she'd like you. Your kindness, your strength, your heart. I'm going to do my best to live up to her legacy. You already are. Just by being yourself. They sat on the bench together looking up at the stars. The same stars Rebecca had looked at. The same stars that would shine on their new family for years to come. Can I tell you something? Tanya said. The day I came here for that interview, I was so close to giving up. I'd been rejected from so many jobs. I couldn't pay my grandmother's bills. I was exhausted and discouraged and ready to quit trying. And then your agency called about this position and something told me to take it. Even though it seemed impossible. Even though I didn't think I had anything left to give. I'm so glad you did. Me too. Because you saved me just as much as I saved Grace. You gave me hope again. You gave me family. You gave me a reason to believe that good things could still happen. Richard pulled her close. That's what love does. It rescues us from ourselves. It gives us a reason to be brave. A year later, they stood in the same garden for Grace's 7th birthday party. The yard was full of children running and playing. Grace was right in the middle of them, healthy and happy and completely alive. Tanya was 4 months pregnant, just starting to show. They hadn't planned it, but when they found out, both Richard and Grace were thrilled. A baby sister or brother? Grace had said with wonder. Someone I can teach things to. Someone I can help take care of. As Tanya watched Grace blow out her birthday candles, surrounded by friends, she thought about how far they'd all come. From the broken, hopeless family she'd walked into to this vibrant celebration of life. "Make a wish," Grace's friends chanted. Grace closed her eyes, thought for a moment, then blew out all 7 candles in one breath. When she opened her eyes, she found Tanya in the crowd and smiled. Later, Tanya asked what she'd wished for. "I can't tell you," Grace said. "It won't come true." "Not even a hint?" "Okay, one hint. I wished for this. For all of us to be happy and together forever. For our family to keep growing and loving each other. For everything to stay just as good as it is right now." "That's a beautiful wish," Tanya said. "And it already came true," Grace pointed out. "So I guess I can tell you after all." That night, after the guests left and the house was quiet, Tanya stood in the nursery they were preparing. It had been a guest room once, but now it was being transformed into a space for the baby. Richard found her there, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his hand resting on her stomach. "Are you thinking about everything that's changed?" he asked. "Everything that's gotten better," Tanya corrected. "A year ago I was barely surviving. Now look at me. Married to an incredible man. Mother to an amazing little girl. Another baby on the way. Working with your foundation, helping other families heal. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. You deserve all of it. We all do. Grace deserves happiness after what she went through. You deserve love after losing Rebecca. We all deserve second chances." They stood together in the quiet room, planning the future. Talking about baby names and nursery colors and how they'd help Grace adjust to being a big sister. But mostly they just held each other. Grateful for the journey that had brought them together. Grateful for the love that had healed them. Grateful for the proof that even in the darkest times, kindness and hope can light the way home. Because that's what this house had become. Home. Not because of the expensive furniture or the beautiful architecture, but because it was filled with people who loved each other, who had chosen each other, who had walked through fire together and come out stronger on the other side. Grace appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I had a dream about Mommy," she said. "Come here, sweetheart," Tanya said, opening her arms. Grace snuggled between them. In the dream, Mommy was smiling. She was standing in a garden full of roses and she looked so happy. And she told me that she loves me, that she's proud of me, and that she's glad I have you both. "That sounds like a beautiful dream," Richard said. "It was. And when I woke up I wasn't sad. I was just grateful. Grateful that I got to be her daughter. And grateful that I get to be your daughter too." She looked at Tanya. "Is that okay? To call you my mother?" Tanya's eyes filled with tears. "It would be the greatest honor of my life." "Okay then. Good night, Mom. Good night, Dad. I love you both." After Grace went back to bed, Richard and Tanya remained in the nursery, holding each other in the soft glow of the nightlight. "Mom," Richard said softly. "She called you Mom." "I know. How does it feel?" "Terrifying. Wonderful. Right." Tanya smiled through her tears. "It feels like coming home." And in that moment, in a house that had known terrible grief but had chosen to open its doors to hope, a new family continued to grow. Not built on forgetting the past but on honoring it. Not pretending that loss doesn't hurt, but acknowledging that love can heal. Because in the end, that's what this story was always about. Love. The kind that shows up when everything seems lost. The kind that sits patiently in the darkness waiting for light. The kind that says, "I see you. I value you. I choose you." The kind that leads us home.